I think part of their argument ends up being, look, what we're trying to say is the way you've constructed society, you assume that everyone can hear. So when we go navigate in that society, yeah, we're disabled because you're assuming all the time, just like in this conversation right now. Like I'm assuming that you can hear me, right? But when we are in our own community, we don't make that assumption. We build our society around a greater level of inclusivity, right? A greater level of universal access. We assume that not everyone can hear. And so that we already have subtitles and people already know how to speak sign. And so we are constructing our society not assuming that people have that ability. And so what you start to realize is disability really doesn't mean, oh, I lack or have an ability nearly as much as it means whether or not your society has decided to build itself around the presumption that you have an ability. And then if you don't have it, society's like, well, you need to get yourself fixed. Okay, so why do I think that this is important in the film? Well, I think it's particularly important because of Elphaba, because Elphaba then represents kind of the other side of this issue, right? So in other words, we have the medicalization side, which is, okay, let's go and fix this person, right? The cochlear implants, this idea that there's something wrong with this person, right? But then we have the side of it is, what happens when the person says, like, I don't, you know what, I'm fine. I don't want to be fixed. I'm great the way that I am. I've decided to be out there with it, and you're going to have to see the way that you mistreat people who are different. So in Elphaba's case, I think what you end up seeing is the way that we villainize people who we treat as having a lack, who refuse to participate in that lackingness. And I think it's a very, very, very neat and clear kind of analogy to it. Just sets right on top of the experience that women have in terms of being treated as if they're disabled because they're women, right? Oh, you're by default weaker. You're by default more emotional. You're by default not as smart. And it comes out in things like when like little kids will ask their parents, like, oh, what's the difference between boys and girls? And the parents will say, well, boys have penises, girls don't. And what you realize is already embedded in that is the idea that women don't have a vagina so much as they lack a penis. So we're understanding them and defining them in terms of their lacking of something, right? And so this comes up very clearly in the argument about trans athletes right now, right? This argument that you never hear people talking about trans men participating in men's sports and why that's problematic. It's always trans women that's the concern, as if like, oh, well, but all of these women on their own team, they just can't compete. They're playing on the special team for people who lack strength and agility and ability. And if you introduce a secret man, well, he's just going to be able to come and dominate and destroy everything because by default he has everything that she doesn't, right? And it's absurd. It's absurd because what you realize is not only is it deeply problematic for the treatment of the trans population, it is also deeply embedded in the idea that women are fundamentally lacking a thing that they just can't ever get, right? And I think that this speaks so effectively through Wicked, in part because of the wizard. The wizard becomes in a kind of a disability studies analysis, the wizard becomes the representation of medicalization, and medicalization in particular by men, where there's this idea of like, we can come in and we can fix you and we can use technology to do it. Notice that the wizard is not connected to the world. He is outside of the world, right? So if the world of Oz is a magical space, and let's go ahead and say that that's a kind of feminine space, right? It has magic, it's bodily, you have these powerful women inside of this space. Well, you have this guy who's external to it, who lacks access to that magic, right? Lacks access to the spirituality, right? To the connectedness to the world and to the magical world. He lacks access to it, but he says that he can do it better. Oh, actually, I do. But what he does is he uses a mechanical means by which to engage the world. And I think that that speaks to a lot of people who deal with birthing, right? The medical world of birthing, the familial world of birthing. In other words, that women have been having this experience for a very long time. People who give birth have been having the experience of giving birth, right, throughout the entirety of human existence. It's become more and more common to make it a medicalized space in which there's people who are not you, not the owner of your own body, who know what's best for you and know what's best for your body in that regard. And a lot of times it leads to things that really aren't in the best interest of the person giving birth, right? The idea of like, well, you need to lay down as you give birth. It denies gravity, right, as an assistant in the birthing process. It doesn't work as well. We know this just like from like posture and the way that the birthing process works. But who does it help? Who does it make much easier? Well, presumably the medical professionals who are assisting in the birthing process, they're not having to like get underneath you or something like that, right? It makes everything much easier to access for them. So who are we really helping in the birthing process? It seems like in some ways we're making it as easy as possible on the doctors. Things like inducing labor, for instance, is really a way of just meeting kind of doctor schedules more so than it is mother schedules. So this isn't to say, and I should add an important caveat, that the medical profession is constantly saving lives, right? It is there are so many children and so many mothers and so many birth givers who are saved by this process. I have a dear friend who would have died in childbirth had it not been for a C-section. My point is only that we have almost a total give it to the doctors kind of a way that's similar to the wizard. So rather than it being kind of a communal conversation between the person who's giving birth and the medical world and like what's in their best understanding, experience, and an awareness that their own body is a powerful and magical something that should be trusted and listened to and that they have experience with as well, it becomes just trust the wizard. The wizard can take care of it. Even if your body's telling you otherwise, don't listen to it. And so I think that to me is a kind of powerful realization that we have in Wicked, where this guy is representative of men basically telling women, I can fix it for you. Ignore your own power. So by my lights, the whole kind of film revolves around this idea of how do we treat people who we've decided are disabled? And the danger then becomes the ones who say, you know what, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm not going to participate in this in your way. I'm fine as I am, becomes someone that we have to kind of hate, because at that point they become someone who's rejecting what we view as the way that society actually should be. And so you start seeing that, like I've mentioned before, with the treatment of the trans population, the treatment of the gay population, and the treatment of women. In other words, all people who we tend to, as a society, feel like, well, I'm reaching out to you with my medical or spiritual or religious or social hand and saying, hey, you have this problem, but we can fix you. Just go to this camp. And the people who say, no, I'm not going to your camp to be fixed by you, or I'm not doing the things that you've decided are best for my body and my person and who I am. I'm fine the way that I am. I know what's in my best interest. I will pursue the medical options in the way that make the most sense to me, or I will not in the way that makes the most sense to me. Well, those people become horribly villainized, right? They are the green people. They are the outsiders. They are the wicked. So thanks so much for taking your time to talk with me today. If you have thoughts, if there's something I missed, I would love to hear it. Please pop it in the comments. If you found it interesting and valuable, please like, subscribe. Please tell at least 2 other people that you found it interesting and get them to do the same. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.